Joining us now on the phone, Senator Josh Hawley from the Show Me State. Senator Hawley, always a pleasure to have you. And I want to get into the latest legislation that you're proposing, but I have to get your reaction to what this video that you retweeted that took place in Houston. China says that they're going to have some kind of response to this. What would China's response to this be? And I would imagine that they should be more afraid of the United States' response, considering we were the ones who were the targets of their espionage activities.
You bet they should be, Dana, and I applaud the administration for taking this move and closing the consulate. It's a bold move, but it's absolutely necessary because they have been running basically a glorified spy ring, and they are trying to influence elected officials, including members of Congress. And we have been warned, members have been warned about this for months now, that China is stepping up its espionage activities across a range of fronts. And so this is just one more instance, and we should not allow them to get away with it. Now, about the burning of the papers, what I said is when I saw that video, listen, you don't burn papers if you don't have something to hide. I mean, we've seen this movie before when people who are getting kicked out of the country, spies getting kicked out of the country, they try to burn everything so that our officials, law enforcement, can't actually see what was going on. So that right there is basically an implicit admission by them that they've been doing all kinds of crazy and probably illegal things, certainly in violation of their treaty commitments. So more to come on this story, I think, as we learn more about it. But it is important that we stand up and say we're drawing the line.
Yeah, very important, especially what you mentioned, too, them increasing their efforts to maybe compromise members of Congress. I mean, do you get the idea that that was sort of the goal? And I always go back. The reason I bring this up is because I go back to the old story of Senator Dianne Feinstein and her driver, who apparently was in with the CPC and may or may not have been a part of such an activity.
It's absolutely their goal, and they have been at it now for some time, although I think really since around the end of last year, I mean, there has been a significant uptick in espionage activity. And as it relates to members of Congress, everything from trying to influence them, tracking people's movements, and then also trying to coerce them, co-opt them at least. I mean, try to get them to support various CCP initiatives using a range of measures. So this is a pattern now. I mean, Beijing has been on the offensive. They are imperialists. They're the world's new imperialists. They want to impose their ideology, which is really just basically old-fashioned authoritarian Beijing supremacy. They want to impose that on the world, and they know that we are what is standing. We Americans are what stand in between them and world power, and that's why we've got to stand strong.
And we're also funding them, though, because we do so much business with China and that instant consumer gratification. Now, to this point, you've introduced a bill that is targeting looks at corporate America to hold them accountable. And obviously, this is a hit at China because you want to make it to where corporate America is held accountable for slave labor involved in their supply chains. It's called the SLAVEFREE Business Certification Act. It's Senate Bill 4241, and it increases corporate supply chain disclosure requirements, audits, all of that. And you even mentioned how you have so many celebrities here in our country that are hawking products. And this obviously has to be a hit at the NBA as well, because they're making millions of dollars off of slave labor that assembles their products. And then, of course, you look at the NBA. You have tweeted or you announced the pledge, and you said that you called on Nike, LeBron James, and the NBA to take the pledge for this act. Have you had any response to that question? Have they taken the pledge?
No, they haven't taken the pledge. It's a simple pledge, Dana. It just is, I am slave free. And we started the hashtag slave free because every American multinational like Nike, like the NBA, like the NFL for that matter, and all the others that do business overseas, they ought to be able to tell us as Americans that they are not profiting off of slave labor. And these same companies, many of which have gladly taken our jobs away and sent them overseas, one of the reasons it turns out it's so darn cheap is because they use slave labor. Like in concentration camps in China, Nike has done this. Apple has done this. So they ought to pledge to the public right now that they are slave-free. And, yeah, the celebrities who have product lines with these different companies, they ought to guarantee that these product lines are slave-free.
Now, what is the best way to sort of reprioritize American consumer behavior habits while still respecting the Constitution and the principles that drive us to be conservatives. Because, I just know that because I make a conscious effort every day. I'd like, for just to give you an example, I'd get drinking glasses, just like regular glasses for like water and soda and tea. I could not believe how many things were made in China, and I actually had to do legwork to make sure I found something that was made in the USA. It is insane how difficult this is because so much is made in China. Americans, and it can't just be like some Americans. Everybody has to stop and make this a purposeful choice. But in addition to holding corporate America accountable, what can we do to, I don't know if it's like a situation of incentivizing, but with respects to our limited government constitutional stance, how can we do that and encourage everyday Americans to do the same and to stop funding the Communist Party of China?
Well, number one, I think that we can get together in a program like this one and an effort like this in a social movement like SLAVEFREE and say we're going to expect Nike and Adidas and clothing manufacturers, we're going to expect them to not use forced slave labor, for heaven's sake. We're going to demand that. We're going to say you got to be slave-free because you know what? That would actually incentivize in the long run. That would incentivize bringing jobs back to this country. Plus, it is the right thing to do. But beyond that, Dana, I also think we've got to get our supply chains moved back to the United States. And in a lot of instances, we just need to require that a certain percentage amount of the goods be made in this country, especially for stuff like pharmaceuticals, our drugs, our protective equipment and gear. Too much of that is made overseas, and it is actually a security and a health risk. So we should just say, listen, you got to make X amount here in the United States. And if we did that, then these companies would find a way to do it, and it would mean more American jobs. That to me, rather than you can try and tax them, you can try and regulate them, and there are places, there are better and worse ways to do that. But there's a lot to be said for just saying, listen, when it comes to particularly our national security, our health, we're just going to mandate that you make this stuff in the United States, and that I think is a great option that we need to use.
Why is it always the wokest people are the biggest abusers of this? I mean, you have, with all the riots and everything that we have out there now, so many people talking about equality, but yet there really isn't a lot of objection in the media. In fact, we played audio just not just a little bit ago. Democratic Chairman Adam Smith, who is defending China and the coronavirus. Why is it that it's the wokest people who make the biggest displays of defense for a nation like communist China carrying out all of these egregious human rights abuses?
Because they don't want to do anything that would actually affect their bottom line. And at the end of the day, I mean, that's the dirty little secret. These these woke corporations, these woke capitalists, they are happy to give hundreds of millions of dollars to charitable organizations, including Black Lives Matter, which is not a charitable organization, and to try and distract. Like, look, we're woke, we're socially just. But then you say to them, okay, well, how about you quit shipping jobs overseas? How about you quit relying on slave labor? Oh, no. Oh, they're not going to do that because that would actually impact their strategies, their money. They'd have to do something different about that. So it's time that we stood up to them and we said, listen, we expect you not to use slave labor. We also expect you to prioritize American principles and American workers. That's what real social responsibility looks like. You had the Senate Committee on Homeland Security unanimously voted to approve your bill banning TikTok on government-issued devices. And as everybody knows, TikTok is it's just a Chinese company, and there's all kinds of questions as to security because communist China. I'm actually shocked that this was even allowed on government devices in the first place, Senator. I know. It's amazing, isn't it? I mean, this is, you talk about a common sense thing, and I'm glad it passed today. Hope it'll pass to the full Congress here really soon. But we've got to get TikTok off of the government devices. And Dana, at the end of the day, what we really need is we need TikTok to get separated from the Chinese control. We need the parent company in China to sell TikTok. The problem is right now TikTok was purchased by a China-based company. And so now, I mean, for all those folks out there who are listening to the show and have it on their phones, it seems like a fun app, and it is. Problem is it's spying on you 24/7, your searches, your keystrokes, your contact list. It's scooping all that stuff up, and it can transfer it to Beijing and the Chinese Communist Party. That just should not be allowed in the United States of America. American consumers should not be put at risk like that. So we've got to stop that data collection. We've got to stop that data transfer. And ultimately, companies like China, I mean, countries like China, shouldn't probably be allowed to do business in this space in the United States when they have access to sensitive technology unless they can guarantee that they are not taking our data. And unfortunately, that's what they're doing with TikTok.
Would we have to make some kind of declaration as to their status with the United States in order to do that?
Well, what we can do is there's a couple things, actually. Right now, the administration, and I'm glad to hear the president's been talking about this. Secretary Pompeo has been talking about this, and I think more to come from them. But what they could do right now is they could put TikTok on a basically it's a watch list for security risks, and that would deny TikTok access to like the App Store, for instance, which would be tough, be devastating for them. We've done something similar with Huawei, which is another basically Chinese spy ring masquerading as a business. So there are some tough steps that we can and I think should take in order to shut TikTok out. And ultimately what we need to do, again, is we need to demand that the Chinese parent company sell off TikTok, sell it to Americans or to other owners who are not based in China or Russia or somewhere that's a security threat, and protect Americans' data. It just shouldn't be that if you download TikTok to your phone, all of a sudden Beijing has a direct line to all of your personal information. That's just wrong.
Yeah, we're talking with Missouri Senator Josh Hawley, the Show Me State, and I just two more questions for you. But the one of which is, I feel as though because I'm a cynic, I'm a natural cynic, and I don't want to believe that we're almost too late at this point in stopping just how much power China has accrued. Because when we talk about TikTok being on people's phones, a lot of people might think, oh well, I'm not worried about Beijing spying on me. Well, it's not just you. It's the behavior, the habits, etc. of the American people, and to use that as intelligence. I mean, there's so many things that can be done with that information, but it feels almost like you're fighting against the current at this point, because they are, for so long, I think that really our government has been kind of apathetic in terms of how they have spread and not being more proactive and making sure that they don't take root, for the lack of a better way to put it, in certain places, like, for instance, in Hollywood production with Tencent and in gaming, etc. So what are your thoughts on that? Because it feels like an uphill battle.
I think that we really are at an inflection point, and we're at a critical moment. If we don't take actions now to stand up to China, to stop their infiltration of our market in ways that manipulate and break our laws. I mean, this is the thing. They're not content to abide by our free enterprise system. That's the whole purpose. They want to undermine it. They don't want to come over and just do business honest, open. No, they want to come over to spy on us, do what they've been caught doing in Houston, taking our information. By the way, I mean, think back to the Equifax breach of a couple of years ago, 3 years ago, where all of the folks' personal credit history, guess who was behind that? China. So this has got to stop, and we're at the point right now, if we stand up to them, we could do something about it. If not, it's just going to get harder and harder. Back to the NBA for a second. This is why it's important to insist that American corporations, including these big sports corporations, also take a stand for America. Because remember, China wants to impose their anti-free speech values on us by using outfits like the NBA. Yeah. They tried to get the NBA censored. They tried to get the general manager of the Houston Rockets fired when he said something in support of Hong Kong a few months ago. That's outrageous. And we ought to say to China, step off. I mean, you don't get to tell us what to do in the United States.
Yeah, they're using our consumer habits against us. They've weaponized our instant gratification desire. They've weaponized it against us, and not everybody's even aware that they've done this. I mean, in some respects, it's kind of clever. In others, it's absolutely terrifying. It's like I feel like I'm in an episode of Black Mirror. Really. One last question for you, because it's a Missouri issue, and you are from my home state, Show Me State. I have to get you to weigh in on that McCluskey case happening in St. Louis City with the Circuit Attorney Kim Gardner. Do you believe that this is an attack on self-defense, Second Amendment? How do you view this, and what are you watching with this case?
100% an attack on the Second Amendment. That's clearly what it is. This is an unbelievable abuse of power by a prosecutor. That's why I've asked for the United States Department of Justice to open right now a civil rights investigation of the entire Circuit Attorney's Office. This is a prosecutor who has let dozens of violent criminals go free in St. Louis without so much as a slap on the wrist just in the last few weeks, just coming out of this rioting and looting. And then she turns around and she goes after a couple standing on their own property with lawful firearms defending their home. I mean, it is a political stunt. It is a show trial, and it is a violation of the Constitution of the United States. and she should be held to account for it.
There you go. Senator Josh Hawley, always a pleasure. Senator Hawley, we hope you have a great rest of your week. We look forward to talking with you again soon. We'll be watching as far as the TikTok bill and also the Slave-Free Business Certification Act. Thanks so much.